4:11 a.m. Long Beach, California, July 7th, 2026. A federal entry team of 22 agents moved through the dark perimeter of the Meridian Cold Storage Yard, a chain-link compound of refrigerated shipping containers 3 blocks east of the Port of Los Angeles. No lights. No guard. Just the hum of shore power units running current into 3 40-foot reefer containers in the back row. The team leader, HSI Special Agent Dana Reyes, held up a fist. The column stopped. She had a bolt cutter in her left hand and a warrant in her right. Both had taken 68 days to get here. Every hour of those 68 days, 17 young American women had been somewhere inside that yard. Tonight, that ended. But this story doesn't start with a raid. It starts with a fuel invoice. A single line item on a maintenance spreadsheet. A number that shouldn't have existed. One detail. One analyst. 68 days between those two moments. Here's how it unraveled. By spring 2026, Meridian Cold Storage LLC had been registered in Delaware for 14 months. Its listed office was a mail forwarding suite in Carson, California. On paper, Meridian was an import brokerage specializing in refrigerated perishables, cut flowers, and fresh-caught seafood through the Port of Los Angeles. Actually, revenue, zero. Not a single outbound manifest had been filed since the company leased 17 containers from Pacific Basin Yard Services on April 3, 2026. The lease was paid 3 months in advance. Cash wire transferred from Panama. Pacific Basin's operations manager, Gerald Forsyth, accepted it without question. His job was the square footage, not the contents. What Forsyth didn't know, what nobody in the yard's chain of command had checked, was that those 17 containers were drawing shore power every day. 24 hours. 7 days a week. For 68 consecutive days. Shore power keeps reefer containers cold. It circulates air. A closed, non-operational reefer container doesn't need shore power. Meridian's 17 units had been logged as closed and non-operational since April. But the power kept running. And somebody kept paying for it. That somebody paid through a subsidiary account connected to a shell entity registered in Belize. The payment trail took 3 financial intelligence analysts and a grand jury subpoena to untangle. But the first thing that caught anyone's attention wasn't a wire transfer. It was a diesel fuel delivery receipt. Special Agent Claudia Mares had been an HSI financial analyst at the Los Angeles field office for 6 years. In late June of 2026, she was assigned to review financial exhibits attached to a 10-defendant federal indictment unsealed through the Central District of California, a human trafficking and forced labor case anchored in the greater Los Angeles area. Her task was narrow: map the money. Identify which financial instruments the defendants used, trace fund flow between entities, and flag anything inconsistent with the stated business purpose. She spent 3 days on the defendants' personal accounts. Multiple layers of legitimate-looking business activity. A restaurant supply company. A commercial cleaning service. A freight forwarding firm. Each filing the right tax forms, each showing modest revenues. Then she pulled the supporting exhibits. 147 pages of invoices, receipts, and maintenance logs. On page 91, she found it. A diesel fuel delivery receipt. Dated June 19, 2026. Vendor, Pacific Coast Mobile Fueling Services. Client, Meridian Cold Storage LLC. Quantity, 80 gallons of diesel, delivered to a generator servicing Storage Block C at the Pacific Basin Yard on East Harbor Boulevard. 80 gallons. Roughly $320. Mares looked at the delivery date. She looked at the client name. She pulled Meridian's lease file. Meridian Cold Storage, LLC, closed and non-operational since April 3rd. She read it again. Then she opened another window and pulled Pacific Basin's operational logs for the same yard and date range. According to those logs, Storage Block C had been dormant since April. No maintenance. No tenant access. No product movements. But someone had ordered 80 gallons of diesel for a generator in a dormant block. And someone had signed for the delivery. The signature was illegible. Mares flagged the invoice. She wrote in her case notes, fuel delivery to non-operational containers, June 19th. Generator usage doesn't match logged status. Shore power billing also active since April 3rd. Cross-reference power draw records. Escalate. She sent the flag to her supervising agent at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. By morning, Mares had already pulled the shore power billing records herself. The numbers weren't subtle. 3 reefer containers in Block C had drawn a combined average of 11 kilowatt-hours per hour, every hour, for 68 consecutive days. That's the power draw of 3 fully operational refrigerated units maintaining an interior temperature consistent with human habitation. Not produce storage. Not equipment cooling. People living there. One detail. One line on page 91 of a financial exhibit. 48 hours later, a joint operation involving HSI, the FBI's Los Angeles field office, and the Los Angeles Port Police had a surveillance team on the yard. Here's what doesn't make sense. The entry team could have moved the first night. They had probable cause. They had a warrant drafted. But lead case agent, HSI Supervisory Special Agent Frank Arrieta, made a different call. His team would spend 48 additional hours building a complete picture of the yard's entry pattern before cutting a single seal. The reason? Surveillance showed the containers received a brief daily maintenance visit. Someone was going in. Someone with access. If they moved too early, they'd get the containers but lose the defendants. Arrieta wanted both. That decision proved correct, and it added 2 more days to 68. Those 2 days mattered to families calling tip lines since April. Among the women inside those 3 containers was a 24-year-old named Sonia Alcala, a bakery manager from Fresno. She had driven to Los Angeles on March 29th for a job interview she found on a staffing agency website. The agency was a front operation connected to the same shell company network that operated Meridian. Sonia called her mother from a gas station on the I-5 at 11:15 a.m. That was the last contact her family received. Her mother, Graciela Alcala, filed a missing persons report with the Fresno Police Department the next day. When Fresno forwarded it to the California Department of Justice's Missing Persons Unit, Sonia's case was cataloged alongside 37 other active cases flagged that spring from a geographic corridor running from Bakersfield to Los Angeles. The pattern, women in their 20s, last known contact in the Los Angeles metro area, no subsequent activity on financial accounts or cell phones, was noticed by a DOJ analyst as early as May 15th. The analyst's memo recommended coordination with HSI and the FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force. The memo sat in a supervisor's inbox for 11 days before it was routed. 11 days. There's something about that delay that doesn't sit right. This wasn't a systems failure in the abstract sense. This was a specific internal routing gap. The memo existed. The pattern was identified. And still, 11 days passed before it reached the right desk. What strikes us about this case is how close the entire investigation came to missing its window. Mares found her invoice on the 71st day of captivity. The women were recovered on the 69th day from when most of them were first reported missing. Some of the 17 had been inside for fewer days, some longer. 69 is the official composite figure. 69 days. The system found the thread on day 71 and moved fast enough to pull it before it went cold. But it found it almost by accident, buried in a financial exhibit. Meanwhile, in Reno, Nevada, a woman named Patricia Odom had not stopped making calls. Her daughter, Kelsey Odom, 26 years old, had been a hospice intake coordinator in Reno, working at a care facility on the south side of the city. Kelsey had been engaged since January. Her dress fitting for an August wedding was scheduled at a bridal shop on Virginia Street for May 14th. She never arrived. Patricia Odom called the Reno police tip line 43 times between April 22nd and July 6th. She created a Facebook group that grew to 900 members in 6 weeks. She drove to Los Angeles twice, spoke to an FBI community liaison, and mailed printed tip packages to the Central District U.S. Attorney's Office, the HSI Los Angeles Field Office, and the California Attorney General's Office. Put yourself in Patricia Odom's position. You know your daughter is somewhere. You know she didn't simply vanish. You're calling, mailing, driving, posting, and the system is receiving your calls and filing them in a database that hasn't yet been cross-referenced against a financial exhibit on page 91 of a related federal indictment. Patricia Odom didn't break the case. Claudia Mares broke the case. But Odom's 43 calls kept Kelsey's file visible in the tip database, which is why Kelsey's name appeared in the preliminary victim roster the FBI compiled within hours of the warrant being issued. The surveillance phase lasted 46 hours. During that window, agents observed a single vehicle, a gray commercial cargo van, California plates, registered to Western Pacific Distribution Services LLC, entering the yard through a secondary access gate at approximately 11:30 p.m. on the first night and approximately 12:15 a.m. on the second. On both occasions, occupants spent between 14 and 18 minutes inside the yard before departing. Agents photographed the van, ran the plates, and cross-referenced the registration. Western Pacific Distribution Services LLC was incorporated in Nevada. Its registered address, a mail forwarding suite in Henderson, had been used by 3 other entities in the 10-defendant indictment. One company network, multiple shell layers, the same 2 addresses cycling through a rotation designed to stop exactly the kind of cross-referencing Mares had done. What the defendants apparently didn't account for was a financial exhibit naming all of them in the same filing. The surveillance team operated from 2 fixed observation posts and 1 mobile unit over those 46 hours. The fixed posts were established in a decommissioned freight broker's office space on the north side of East Harbor Boulevard, leased under a cover identity for 48 hours at a cost of $800. The second post was a panel van backed into a parking structure, equipped with long-range thermal imaging and a suppressed radio relay. The mobile unit was a single, unmarked sedan rotating through 4 designated observation points on surrounding streets in 40-minute intervals, varying its route to avoid pattern detection. Over those 46 hours, the surveillance team documented every vehicle within 100 meters of the yard's perimeter. 22 vehicles total. 9 were commercial trucks making deliveries to adjacent yards. 3 were personal vehicles belonging to Pacific Basin employees. 2 were Port Police patrol units. The remaining 8 vehicles, including the gray cargo van, were of investigative interest. Of those 8, 6 were cleared within hours through plate registration and driver identification. The gray van and 1 additional vehicle, a black late-model SUV that idled for 7 minutes outside the main gate, remained uncleared. The black SUV didn't return. Its plates traced to a rental agreement under a fraudulent identity, constructed using a stolen Social Security number belonging to a 73-year-old retired schoolteacher in Phoenix, Arizona, who had no connection to the case. That loose thread hasn't been resolved. On the second night of surveillance, at 12:15 a.m., when the gray van made its second visit, a 2-agent foot team captured 16 minutes of continuous thermal imaging footage of the van's entry, the movement of 2 individuals between the van and the container row, and their departure. That footage is Exhibit 73. It shows the unmistakable outline of containers being opened briefly and then resealed. The visit wasn't a security check. It was a provisioning run. Someone was keeping 17 women alive inside 3 reefer containers. That was the inference Arrieta drew from Exhibit 73 at 1:47 a.m. on July 6th. He noted it in his case log in 2 sentences. Thermal imaging confirms active interior access during second van visit. Consistent with provisioning rather than security check. Proceeding with warrant application at first business hour. He didn't sleep that night. He spent the remaining hours before dawn writing the affidavit. Arrieta's team applied for a no-knock search warrant on the afternoon of July 6th. The affidavit ran to 41 pages. It detailed the power draw records, the fuel invoice, the shell company connections, the surveillance observations, and the preliminary victim pattern analysis from the DOJ coordinator's memo. The warrant was signed by a federal magistrate judge at 8:57 p.m. Arrieta set the entry for 4:11 a.m. on July 7th. Early morning entry at a port-adjacent yard with a single vehicle maintenance pattern. Low civilian traffic. Maximum tactical clarity. The entry team staged in 2 groups. Group 1, 12 agents including Agent Reyes with her bolt cutter, would approach the containers directly through the yard's south vehicle gate, which the surveillance team had confirmed could be breached with a standard federal ram in under 4 seconds. Group 2, 10 agents, would secure the perimeter and the secondary access gate to prevent vehicle egress. At 3:50 a.m., a complication. One of the 2 generator units servicing Block C developed a fault signal on the yard's external power monitoring panel, a panel that transmitted fault alerts by automated text message to a maintenance contact number registered to Western Pacific Distribution Services. That meant someone connected to the operation might receive an alert, which meant someone might go to the yard to check on it, which meant the entry team might find company. Arrieta made the call in under 2 minutes. They moved the entry up by 21 minutes, from 4:11 to 3:50. The actual entry was logged at 3:53 a.m. The bolt cutter took 4 seconds on the padlock. Reyes pulled the chain link gate open. The column moved to the back row in formation, flashlights low to the ground. The 3 reefers in Block C were stacked in an L configuration. The lead container's exterior temperature read 38 degrees Fahrenheit on its external display. Habitation range. The seals on the container doors weren't manufacturer's seals. They were aftermarket padlocks, 4 of them, commercial grade, on the first unit alone. Reyes cut the first padlock at 4:11 a.m. The original scheduled time reached 4 minutes after the adjusted entry because of the distance across the yard. She noted later that the time stayed the same despite everything that changed around it. The door opened. Federal protocol in a potential victim recovery operation requires the lead agent to identify herself and state the nature of the entry. Reyes did that. She said, "Federal agents, Homeland Security investigations. You are safe. We are here to take you out." There was a pause of approximately 4 seconds. then movement from the interior. The first woman who came to the door was 23 years old, from Stockton, California. She had been missing since April 11th. She was walking. She was coherent. She was wrapped in a Mylar emergency blanket that someone inside had saved from a discarded shipping package. 11 women were recovered from the first container, 3 from the second, 3 more from the third. 17 total, all alive. Paramedics from the Los Angeles County Fire Department had staged 4 units at the yard's main gate on Reyes's request, submitted to the incident commander at 9 p.m. the previous evening. Medical personnel entered the yard immediately upon the all-clear signal from the perimeter team. Each of the 17 women was escorted from her container by a federal agent, wrapped in a blanket against the pre-dawn chill, and walked to a waiting ambulance for immediate medical evaluation. Transport to a receiving hospital was completed within 40 minutes of the first door opening. Hospital intake records cited in the subsequent indictment filings noted that all 17 required evaluation for conditions associated with extended limited mobility confinement. The indictment's victim impact section doesn't elaborate. The horror lives in what the documents don't say. What the documents do say, in the sterile vocabulary of federal case records, is that interior examination of the 3 containers revealed improvised sleeping arrangements constructed from folded industrial packing foam and shipping blankets. A gravity-fed water supply, using commercial 5-gallon jugs, 16 of them, stacked along the forward wall of the first container. A battery-powered LED lantern depleted in the second container. A collection of handwritten notes, later cataloged as evidence items 1 through 44, discovered folded inside a gap in the container's interior wall paneling. The notes were dated. The dates corresponded precisely to the period of confinement. They were in multiple handwriting styles. They were in English and Spanish. Federal evidence technicians photographed each note in place before removal. Their contents are sealed under the victim protection provisions of the indictment. The evidence processing team that entered Block C after the victim recovery spent 4 hours and 17 minutes documenting the container interiors before the first item was physically moved. Every surface was photographed. Every piece of material was cataloged. A forensic specialist from the FBI's Los Angeles Evidence Response Team collected biological material from all 3 containers using a protocol designed for prolonged confinement scenes. That protocol involves a systematic grid sweep of each surface in sequence, with individual collection swabs assigned to numbered grid sections and logged against a master chain of custody form. The chain of custody form for Block C runs to 68 pages. 68 pages. 1 for each day. The van from Western Pacific Distribution Services arrived at the yard's secondary gate at 4:22 a.m. It found the gate blocked by 3 federal vehicles and 4 agents in tactical gear. The driver made one attempt to reverse. A spike strip deployed across the access road stopped that. The driver was taken into custody at 4:24 a.m. He was the 11th defendant. His arrest was not part of the original 10-defendant indictment. It was a same-night addition, processed through the federal booking system by 6 a.m. By that point, the 10 named defendants in the original indictment had already been in custody for approximately 11 hours. A coordinated multi-location arrest operation had begun at 5:45 p.m. on July 6th, the evening before the container entry, targeting defendants at addresses in Los Angeles, Inglewood, and Gardena. 7 of the 10 were taken without incident. 2 were arrested after brief foot pursuits. 1 was not found. 1 defendant remained at large as of the morning of July 7th. A man identified in court documents only as the network's logistics coordinator the person believed to have managed the shell company structure and the yard lease. His last known location was a short-term rental property in the Koreatown neighborhood of Los Angeles. When agents arrived at that address at 6:15 p.m. on July 6th, the property was empty. A coffee cup on the kitchen counter was still warm. He had approximately 45 minutes of lead time. How he received advance warning of the arrest operation is, as of the date these events are reconstructed, an open question in the federal investigation. A second fugitive, a woman described in indictment, documents as a mid-level coordinator responsible for victim recruitment, had not been located in the 4 days preceding the July 7th container entry. She was believed to be outside California. A federal warrant for her arrest remained active. 2 fugitives. One network partially dismantled. In the 72 hours following the recovery operation, federal investigators conducted recorded interviews with victims at the receiving hospitals and at an HSI-designated victim coordination facility in downtown Los Angeles. Those interviews followed a structured trauma-informed protocol developed jointly by HSI, the FBI's Victim Services Division, and a consultant from the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Participation was voluntary. Of the 17 women recovered, 14 agreed to be interviewed within that initial window. 3 requested additional time before speaking with investigators. All 3 subsequently provided statements within the following 5 days. The interviews produced a composite picture of how the recruitment operation had functioned. In 11 of the 14 initial interviews, victims described a nearly identical initial contact sequence. A job listing had appeared on a legitimate employment aggregator platform used by thousands of employers posting entry-level professional positions across the western United States. The listings advertised positions in healthcare administration, hospitality management, and light logistics coordination. The compensation packages cited were modestly above market rate, not so high as to appear fraudulent, but enough to attract applicants looking for stability. Several of the women had applied to multiple listings on the same platform in the same week, unaware they were all feeding the same collection point. The application process had been engineered to feel legitimate at every stage. An initial online application. A follow-up email from a named recruiter at what appeared to be a functioning staffing agency. A phone screening with a person who spoke fluently about the position's responsibilities. A second call scheduling an in-person interview in the Los Angeles metro area. The in-person interview was the terminus. None of the women who arrived for their scheduled interview left under their own direction. The staffing agency's website, later taken down by court order, had been constructed with sufficient operational detail to pass cursory scrutiny. It had a reviews page. It had a staff directory with photographs. It had a contact form that generated automated responses within hours of submission. The photographs were stock images. The reviews were fabricated. The contact form responses were scripted. Federal investigators, working with the platform's trust and safety team, determined that the agency's listings had been live on the platform for approximately 90 days before any automated fraud detection flag was raised. The flag, when triggered, was based on a reporting threshold, a minimum number of user complaints, before the system escalated to human review. The threshold was 12 complaints. 11 complaints had been filed by users who found the listings suspicious. The 12th was never filed, because by the time the 11th woman reported the listing, she had already disappeared. Those 11 complaints sat in a fraud queue. They were not reviewed in real time. Platform policy at the time of the operation did not require human review of fraud complaints until the threshold was crossed or a law enforcement request was received. No law enforcement request had been submitted to the platform because the investigation had not yet surfaced the connection between the listings and the shell company network. Maris found that connection in the financial exhibits. By then, the listings were already gone, taken down proactively by the platform's automated system after a delayed threshold review triggered 9 days after the network was dismantled. The platform has not commented publicly on the 11 complaint queue. Its current trust and safety policies have not been made public in the context of this case. Here's the take that will probably get pushback. The central failure in this case was not the investigation. HSI and the FBI moved fast once Maris flagged the invoice. The failure was the 11-day routing gap between the DOJ analyst's memo in May and its arrival at the task force. 17 women spent those 11 additional days in those containers. That gap is institutional. It's not attributable to any single person's negligence, but it's also not inevitable. It's the result of a bureaucratic handoff process in which a correctly identified pattern sat in a queue while the clock ran. The system found the thread. It should have found it 3 weeks earlier. We dug through the preliminary case documentation and the publicly available indictment exhibits, and one detail kept returning. The DOJ analyst who wrote the May memo, the one who identified the geographic corridor pattern, wrote in her conclusion that the cases shared, quote, a recruitment vector consistent with fraudulent online employment listings. She identified at least 6 of the 17 victims through that mechanism. She named the staffing agency front as a likely instrument. That memo named, obliquely, the same shell company network Maris would identify through the fuel invoice 6 weeks later. The analytical work was done in May. It was sitting in a database in May. There is a line in that memo that reads almost like a footnote from a different era. Recommend immediate coordination with HSI Field Office and FBI Trafficking Task Force for cross-referencing against existing financial intelligence. Like a recommendation dropped into a mailbox that nobody checked. Maris had not read the DOJ memo when she flagged the fuel invoice. She found the same network through a different door, independently, 6 weeks later. The question that doesn't go away: what does it say about federal interagency communication that 2 separate analysts, working in separate offices, identified the same network through separate evidentiary threads, and the system didn't surface the connection until one of them happened to be reviewing a financial exhibit at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday? Is this a solvable problem? Comment what you think, because the cases where the answer is yes and the cases where the answer is no look identical from the outside until something breaks open. The 11th defendant, the van driver arrested at the secondary gate in the minutes after 4 a.m., gave his first statement to federal investigators at the booking facility at 9:41 a.m. on July 7th. His attorney was present. The statement was recorded and has been partially entered into the public record as a government exhibit in subsequent bail proceedings. What the statement reveals, in the portions that are not under seal, is the operational texture of the provisioning operation in its final days. The driver identified himself as a contract employee, retained through a referral from a friend of a friend. He was paid in cash, weekly, and had been told the containers held undocumented workers awaiting relocation, a characterization he accepted without further inquiry. He made the provisioning run 6 nights a week. On Sunday nights, a different driver handled the route. He didn't know the Sunday driver's name or how to contact him. The Sunday driver has not been identified. What the driver brought to the containers each night, documented through his own statement and corroborated by the forensic inventory of the van's contents at the time of arrest, was a standard provisioning load, sealed water jugs, commercially packaged food items, and a portable battery charging unit of the kind commonly used for electronics. The battery charger's significance wasn't immediately apparent to the arresting agents. Its significance became clear when the evidence processing team found, in the first container, a prepaid mobile phone with a partially depleted battery, hidden inside the folded packing foam of one of the improvised sleeping areas. The phone had been used to send 14 text messages between June 22nd and July 3rd. The messages were addressed to a single contact stored in the phone under the name M. The content of those messages is under seal. What has been entered into the public record is the fact of their existence and the date range of their transmission. June 22nd to July 3rd. That is 11 days after Mars flagged the fuel invoice. The messages were sent after the investigation had already been escalated. Investigators have not publicly confirmed whether those messages reached their intended recipient. They have not confirmed whether M corresponds to any named defendant or fugitive in the case. The phone is Government Exhibit 112. The 10 named defendants in the original indictment face federal charges under Title 18, United States Code, Section 1591, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, as well as conspiracy, money laundering, and alien harboring counts. The charging documents identify the defendants as a loosely structured criminal organization operating since at least late 2025, with recruitment activity spanning at least 4 states. The 11th defendant, arrested at the yard gate on the morning of July 7th, faces additional charges of obstruction and transportation in furtherance of criminal activity. The financial investigation, still active as of the date of this reconstruction, has identified approximately $2.3 million in proceeds that passed through the shell company network between November 2025 and June 2026. Of that amount, approximately $900,000 has been traced to accounts subject to federal asset seizure. The remaining $1.4 million has not been located. Wire transfers connect the network's financial layer to accounts in Panama, Belize, and one additional jurisdiction whose name has been redacted in the publicly available indictment exhibits. Federal prosecutors have issued mutual legal assistance requests to foreign counterparts. As of early July 2026, no responsive documents had been received. The logistics coordinator who fled his Koreatown rental 45 minutes ahead of the arrest team has not been located. A federal fugitive warrant is active. His photograph has been distributed to border crossing authorities at land, air, and sea ports of entry. As of the date of this reconstruction, he has not been apprehended. The second fugitive, the recruitment coordinator, has not been located. The warm coffee cup in the Koreatown kitchen doesn't resolve itself. It sits in the case file as evidence of a gap in operational security, not in the federal operation, which moved correctly once it had what it needed, but in the assumption that a same-evening arrest sweep could hold its operational silence long enough to close all 11 threads simultaneously. It couldn't. Graciela Alcala was notified by phone at 6:14 a.m. on July 7th that her daughter Sonia had been recovered alive. A victim services coordinator from HSI's Los Angeles field office made the call. The coordinator's notes from that conversation contain one sentence. Ms. Alcala did not speak for approximately 20 seconds. Then she asked, "Where is she?" Sonia was at a receiving hospital in Long Beach. She was awake. She was able to take a phone call from her mother at 7:50 a.m. The call lasted 11 minutes. Patricia Odom received her notification at 6:27 a.m. Kelsey was in the second container. She was at a different receiving facility. She had been missing for 76 days. Her August dress fitting at the bridal shop on Virginia Street was rescheduled, quietly, by the shop's owner, who had seen the news alerts by 8 a.m. and made a call to hold the appointment open. The wedding date has not been publicly confirmed as proceeding. That is not this story's to resolve. What is this story's to establish? 17 women went missing from American cities between March and June of 2026. A 10-defendant federal indictment named the structure responsible. An analyst at a federal agency found a fuel invoice that shouldn't have existed and escalated it at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. 48 hours and a 41-page warrant affidavit later, an entry team cut the seals on 3 reefer containers in a chain-link yard 3 blocks east of the port of Los Angeles. All 17 were alive. 11 defendants are in federal custody. 2 remain fugitives. $1.4 million in proceeds has not been found. The shell company network has been dismantled. The online recruitment infrastructure it used, the fraudulent staffing agency websites, the job listing accounts, the email domains, has been taken down by court order. New listings with the same format appeared on the same platforms within 9 days. Different names, different email domains, same language in the job descriptions. The yard on East Harbor Boulevard is quiet now. The shore power to Block C has been disconnected. Pacific Basin Yard Services has terminated its lease agreement with all entities connected to the Meridian Shell. Gerald Forsyth, the operations manager who accepted prepaid cash equivalent wire transfers without checking his tenant's stated business activity, has not been charged. His cooperation with the investigation was described in court filings as substantial. The 3 reefer containers remain sealed as federal evidence. Their temperature displays still show readings. The generators that kept them running for 68 consecutive days are still connected to the yard's power grid. The investigation into how the logistics coordinator received his 45-minute warning is ongoing. A network is dismantled. Its financing remains partially hidden. Its fugitives remain at large. And the recruitment infrastructure it used to find 17 young women in 4 American states has already been rebuilt by someone, somewhere, using different names. That's not speculation. That's the case.